October 1907. Vienna, Austria-Hungary. An 18-year-old boy opens an envelope that will determine not just his future, but the fate of 60 million people who don't yet know they're living on borrowed time. Inside that envelope is a single word that will either save the world or condemn it to the darkest chapter in human history. The boy's name is Adolf Hitler. And in our timeline, the word was rejected. But what if it had been accepted? This is the story of the art school acceptance letter that never was, and the apocalypse it could have prevented. Vienna in 1907 stands at the crossroads of history. The sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire, ruled by the aging Emperor Franz Joseph for nearly 6 decades, is the picture of fading grandeur. Its ornate palaces and grand boulevards mask deep tensions, ethnic rivalries between Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, and a dozen other nationalities. Anti-Semitism simmers in the streets, fueled by populist politicians like Mayor Karl Lueger, who openly campaigns on hatred of the city's 200,000 Jews. The city's coffeehouses buzz with radical ideas, Marxism, anarchism, pan-German nationalism. In this cauldron of competing ideologies, Vienna's cultural scene flourishes. This is the city of Gustav Klimt's golden paintings, of Sigmund Freud's revolutionary psychology, of Gustav Mahler's symphonies. It's also the city where a young provincial boy from Linz has come to pursue his dream of becoming an artist. Adolf Hitler arrived in Vienna in February 1907 with grand ambitions and modest talent. His father, Alois Hitler, a customs official, had died 4 years earlier, leaving the family a small inheritance. His mother, Clara, is battling breast cancer, a diagnosis that will claim her life before the year ends. Hitler has no interest in conventional employment. He wants to study at the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, the most prestigious art institution in the German-speaking world. He believes himself destined for greatness. The academy will decide if he's right. October 1907. Hitler submits his application to the academy along with a portfolio of drawings. The test subjects are prescribed: biblical scenes, classical figures, architectural studies. His drawings show technical competence in architectural rendering but struggle with human figures. The perspective is adequate, the lines are clean, but there's something lifeless about them. They lack the spark, the vision, the originality that separates competent draftsmen from true artists. The Academy's panel of professors reviews dozens of applications. The rejection rate is high, only 28 of 113 applicants will be accepted this year. In our timeline, the verdict came swiftly and brutally. Hitler's test drawings were deemed unsatisfactory. The rector advised him to pursue architecture instead, noting his talent for buildings over figures. But Hitler couldn't study architecture without a high school diploma, which he'd never completed. The rejection shattered him. He later wrote in Mein Kampf that this moment sent him into a spiral of despair, made worse when his beloved mother died of breast cancer just 2 months later, in December 1907. By 1908, Adolf Hitler was homeless, sleeping in flophouses, selling postcard paintings to tourists for pennies, and spending his days in public libraries devouring anti-Semitic pamphlets and pan-Germanic nationalist literature. It was in those years of poverty and rage, from 1908 to 1913, that the ideology was forged. The humiliation became hatred. The failure became fuel. And the dreams of artistic glory transformed into fantasies of political power and racial domination. But what if the Academy had seen something different in those drawings? What if one professor had argued that the architectural precision showed promise? What if they'd decided to take a chance on the intense young man from Linz? What if, instead of unsatisfactory, the verdict had been accepted? The letter arrives in October 1907. Hitler tears it open, hands trembling. We are pleased to inform you of your acceptance into the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts for the 1907 to 1908 academic year. His mother, pale and weakening from the cancer ravaging her body, sees her son's face light up with joy. For Clara Hitler, it's one of her last happy moments. She dies 2 months later, but she dies knowing her son has a future. She dies believing he'll be all right. And Adolf Hitler, his ego validated rather than crushed, steps through the doors of the academy in the fall of 1907 as a student, not a reject. This single moment, this butterfly flapping its wings, changes everything. The Vienna Academy of Fine Arts in 1907 is a bastion of classical tradition fighting a losing battle against modernism. The professors still teach in the academic style, precise anatomy, careful perspective, historical and religious themes rendered with almost photographic realism. But outside the academy's walls, the art world is exploding. Pablo Picasso has just painted Les Demoiselles d'Avignon in Paris, shattering centuries of artistic convention with his proto-cubist assault on form. Egon Schiele and Oskar Kokoschka, both studying in Vienna at this very moment, are developing the tortured expressionism that will define the era. The Vienna secession movement, led by Gustav Klimt, has rejected academic conservatism for Art Nouveau sensuality and symbolism. Into this ferment walks Adolf Hitler, 19 years old by the time classes begin, convinced of his own genius but armed with only modest technical ability. His first year is a rude awakening. Hitler discovers he's surrounded by more talented students, young men and women whose technical skills and creative vision far exceed his own. The curriculum is rigorous. Life drawing classes force him to confront his weakness with human figures. He struggles to capture movement, emotion, the play of light on flesh. His figures remain stiff, lifeless. One professor writes in his evaluation, adequate technical execution. Lacks emotional depth. Hitler gravitates toward architectural painting, the precise rendering of buildings, monuments, cityscapes. Here his meticulous attention to detail serves him well. He can draw a Gothic cathedral with mathematical precision, every buttress and spire in perfect perspective. But when asked to paint a portrait, to capture a human soul on canvas, he fails. His paintings are competent but uninspired. They're the work of a skilled draftsman, not a visionary artist. But competence is enough to keep him enrolled. He's not the Academy's star pupil, but he's not its worst either. He inhabits the vast middle ground of students who will graduate to become commercial artists, illustrators, designers, useful professionals but not household names. Hitler's social life at the Academy is limited. His fellow students find him intense, opinionated, difficult to befriend. He holds forth in coffeehouses about architecture and German culture, dominating conversations with monologues that leave others exhausted. He makes acquaintances but few real friends. Several of his classmates are Jewish, a fact that means little to Hitler at this point. His anti-Semitism exists but remains the casual prejudice common among German-speaking Austrians of his class and generation, not yet the all-consuming obsession it will become in our timeline. What Hitler is not doing during these years is crucial. He's not spending endless hours in public libraries reading Lanz von Liebenfell's racist magazine Ostra. He's not attending the demagogic speeches of pan-German nationalist George Ritter von Schauner. He's not living in homeless shelters surrounded by the desperate and dispossessed, nursing grievances against a society that rejected him. He's too busy with coursework, with studio time, with trying to master the craft he's chosen. The radicalization that occurred in our timeline between 1908 and 1913, the transformation of Adolf Hitler from failed artist into political fanatic, never happens. Instead, he's just another art student, struggling to find his voice, to develop his technique, to imagine a career in a field that offers few guarantees of success. The Academy years from 1907 to 1912 pass in relative obscurity. Hitler takes classes in painting, drawing, art history, and architectural design. He receives mediocre grades, marks of satisfactory and adequate predominate his academic record. His professors note his technical competence but express disappointment in his lack of artistic vision. One evaluation from 1910 reads, "Herr Hitler possesses satisfactory draftsmanship and shows particular aptitude for architectural subjects." However, his work lacks the originality and emotional resonance we hope to cultivate in our students. He would do well in commercial applications of his training. It's damning with faint praise, but it's not rejection. And that makes all the difference. Outside the academy walls, the world continues its march toward catastrophe. In 1908, Austria-Hungary annexes Bosnia-Herzegovina, enraging Serbia and Russia. In 1911, the Agadir crisis brings Germany and France to the brink of war over Morocco. In 1912, the Balkan Wars erupt as the Ottoman Empire continues its long collapse. Across Europe, military buildups accelerate. The alliance system solidify, the Triple Entente of France, Russia, and Britain versus the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The great European powers are arming for a war none of them want but all expect. Nationalism rises. Ethnic tensions simmer. The old order is dying, and no one knows what will replace it. And through it all, Adolf Hitler attends classes, sketches buildings, and dreams of a modest career as an artist or architect. In 1912, Hitler completes his studies. He's 23 years old. The diploma he receives certifies him as a graduate of the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, a credential that opens certain doors. He could teach art. He could work for architectural firms as a renderer. He could take commissions for portraits and landscapes. He could design advertisements and commercial art. None of these paths lead to the glory he once imagined, but they offer respectability, a living, a place in society. He's not a failure. He's just ordinary. And ordinary, in this case, might save the world. Vienna in 1912 offers limited opportunities for a newly graduated art student with modest talent. The city's established artists guard their territories jealously. The market for serious art is small and controlled by a handful of wealthy patrons and galleries. Hitler needs to make a living, and that means commercial work. He takes a room in a modest boarding house in the Leopoldstadt district. It's not luxury, but it's not the flophouses of our timeline. He has a bed, a table for his easel, a view of the street below. He has dignity. He begins hustling for work, any work. He paints advertisements for shops. He creates illustrations for cheap magazines. He sells watercolors of famous Vienna landmarks to tourists at the Karlskirche and St. Stephen's Cathedral. It's the same work he did while homeless in our timeline, but the circumstances are entirely different. He's a certified academy graduate now, not a desperate vagrant. He can charge higher prices. He can sign his work with pride. The money isn't abundant, but it's enough. Hitler's personality during these years remains difficult. He's opinionated, verbose, socially awkward. His conversations are monologues. His views on art are rigid. He despises modernism, cubism, expressionism, anything that deviates from classical forms. He attends exhibitions at the Secession Building and leaves in disgust, muttering about degenerate art. But this aesthetic conservatism is not yet political fanaticism. He's a cranky traditionalist, not a revolutionary ideologue. His political views remain those of a typical German-Austrian nationalist of his class. He supports the pan-German movement, which seeks closer ties between Austria and Germany. He harbors anti-Semitic prejudices common to his time and place. Jews are seen as overly influential in banking, media, and culture. But these are background assumptions, not consuming passions. He's not attending political rallies. He's not joining extremist groups. He's too busy trying to pay rent and build a portfolio. By 1913, Hitler's career has found a modest equilibrium. He's established connections with a few shop owners who hire him regularly. He's developed a reputation for reliable, competent work. He's even taken on a couple of students, teaching drawing to middle-class children for extra income. It's not the life he imagined when he first arrived in Vienna with dreams of becoming the next great master. But it's a life. It's stability. It's enough to keep the demons at bay. In our timeline, by 1913, Adolf Hitler had fled Vienna for Munich to avoid military service in the Austrian army. He was living hand to mouth, consumed by hatred, his worldview hardening into the ideology that would define Nazism. But in this timeline, he stays in Vienna. He has no reason to flee. He's not a draft dodger or a vagrant. He's a working artist, a taxpayer, a member of society. And then, in the summer of 1914, the world catches fire. June 28, 1914. Sarajevo, Bosnia. A Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip fires 2 shots that kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife Sophie. The assassination triggers a diplomatic crisis that spirals out of control with terrifying speed. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issues an ultimatum to Serbia. Russia, backing Serbia, mobilizes its army. Germany, fearing a two-front war, implements the Schlieffen Plan, a massive invasion through Belgium to knock France out of the war before turning east to face Russia. Britain, honoring its treaty obligations to Belgium and France, declares war on Germany. Within 6 weeks, all the great powers of Europe are at war. The complex alliance systems, the arms races, the nationalist rivalries, the imperial competitions, all of it explodes in August 1914. Millions of men march to war believing it will be over by Christmas. They're catastrophically wrong. Adolf Hitler, 25 years old when the war begins, faces conscription into the Austro-Hungarian army. In our timeline, he avoided Austrian service and instead volunteered for the German army, serving with the 16th Bavarian Reserve Regiment on the Western Front. His decision to join the German rather than Austrian army was partly ideological. He identified more strongly with Germany than with the multinational Habsburg Empire, and partly practical. He was already in Munich and had no desire to return to Austria. But in this timeline, Hitler is still in Vienna, still an Austrian citizen, with an established life and no reason to flee. When the mobilization orders come, he reports for duty like millions of other young men across the empire. The Austro-Hungarian army in 1914 is a polyglot force: Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Poles, Croats, Serbs, Romanians, and a dozen other nationalities, all wearing the same uniform but speaking different languages and harboring different loyalties. It's an army of an empire in decline, and the war will break it. Hitler is assigned to an infantry regiment and, given his education and bearing, quickly moves to a support role as a regimental runner or dispatch carrier, the same role he held in our timeline. It's dangerous work. Runners carry messages between command posts and frontline units, often under fire, but it's less dangerous than being in the trenches themselves. He serves on the Eastern Front against Russia or possibly the Italian front after Italy enters the war against Austria-Hungary in 1915. The specific front matters less than the experience itself. War transforms every man who experiences it. The industrial slaughter of the First World War, machine guns, artillery barrages, poison gas, the wholesale destruction of human life on a scale never before seen, shatters the certainties of the pre-war world. Hitler witnesses the carnage. He sees friends torn apart by shrapnel. He carries messages through hell, running across cratered landscapes under fire. He receives decorations for bravery, the Austro-Hungarian equivalent of Germany's Iron Cross. He finds, as he did in our timeline, that he's good at being a soldier. The military life suits him. The hierarchy is clear. The purpose is defined. There's camaraderie in the trenches, the bond of men facing death together. For someone who struggled socially as a civilian, the military provides structure and belonging. But there are crucial differences from our timeline. Hitler is fighting for Austria-Hungary, not Germany. His identity is tied to the Habsburg Empire, not to German nationalism in the same visceral way. When he sits in dugouts during bombardments, listening to comrades speak Czech or Hungarian or Croatian, he experiences the empire's diversity firsthand. He's not in Munich absorbing purely German national sentiment. He's in a multinational army where loyalty to the empire competes with ethnic nationalism. And crucially, when the war ends, Hitler will not be in Germany. He'll be in Austria. He won't witness the German Revolution of 1918 to 1919 firsthand. He won't be present for the political radicalization of Munich in the war's aftermath. He won't be recruited into the German army's political education unit that led him to the German Workers' Party, the organization that became the Nazi Party. The war grinds on. 1914 becomes 1915. 1915 becomes 1916. The Battle of Verdun devours 300,000 French lives. The Battle of the Somme kills over 1 million men for negligible territorial gains. The Brusilov offensive shatters Austria-Hungary's armies on the Eastern Front. The Russian Revolution of 1917 takes Russia out of the war but triggers a civil war that will kill millions more. The United States enters the war in April 1917, tipping the balance against the Central Powers. Austria-Hungary begins to disintegrate. Czech, Polish, and South Slav nationalist movements demand independence. The empire is dying, and everyone knows it. By 1918, the end is inevitable. Germany's spring offensive fails. The Allies counterattack. Bulgaria surrenders in September. The Ottoman Empire collapses in October. Austria-Hungary sues for peace in early November. Emperor Karl I, who succeeded Franz Joseph in 1916, flees Vienna. The empire fragments into successor states, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland, Hungary, and a tiny rump Austria, stripped of its territories and great power status. On November 11, 1918, Germany signs an armistice. The guns fall silent. The Great War is over. For empires have collapsed, the German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian. 10 million soldiers are dead. 20 million are wounded. The map of Europe is redrawn. The old order is gone forever. And Adolf Hitler, age 29, is discharged from the Austro-Hungarian army and returns to Vienna, a city transformed by defeat. Vienna in November 1918 is a city in shock. The Habsburg Empire, which ruled Central Europe for 6 centuries, no longer exists. Austria is now a small republic of 6.5 million people, stripped of its Hungarian, Czech, Polish, Italian, and South Slav territories. The city that was once an imperial capital of 52 million subjects is now the oversized capital of a minor nation. The economy is in ruins. Inflation is beginning its climb. Food is scarce. The Allied blockade continued for months after the armistice, starving the civilian population. Soldiers return from the front to find no jobs, no prospects, no future. Political chaos reigns. The Social Democrats declare Austria a republic. Right-wing groups organize paramilitary units. Communist agitators call for revolution on the Bolshevik model. Austria is too small to be economically viable, too German to exist independently of Germany, too defeated to command respect. Adolf Hitler walks through this chaos a changed man. The war has marked him, physically with scars and decorations, psychologically with trauma that will never fully heal. He spent 4 years in hell. He's seen the empire he served collapse. He's experienced the camaraderie of the trenches and the horror of industrial warfare. He returns to find the city of his youth transformed. His boarding house is still there, but the rent has doubled. His pre-war clients have closed their shops or moved away. The art market has evaporated. No one has money for watercolors of Vienna landmarks when they can barely afford bread. Hitler faces a choice. He could try to restart his art career in the devastated post-war economy, though prospects are grim. He could stay in the army. Austria's new government maintains a small military force, but opportunities for advancement are limited in a defeated nation's shrunken armed forces. He could enter politics, joining one of the myriad parties competing in the new republic's chaotic democracy. Many veterans are making this choice, channeling their disillusionment into political activism. In our timeline, Hitler made the political choice. Returning to Munich in late 1918, he stayed in the army and was assigned to a political education unit tasked with immunizing soldiers against communist ideas. This assignment led him to attend a meeting of the tiny German Workers' Party in September 1919. He joined, discovered his oratorical gifts, and within 2 years had transformed it into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis. His political awakening was driven by rage at Germany's defeat. hatred cultivated during his Vienna years, and the opportunities Munich's radical political scene offered. But in this timeline, those conditions don't align. Hitler's Vienna years weren't spent absorbing anti-Semitic propaganda in libraries and flophouses, he was at the academy. He's not in Munich experiencing the chaos of the German Revolution firsthand, he's in Vienna. The German Workers' Party exists in Munich, but without Hitler, it remains one of dozens of obscure fringe groups. And Hitler himself, though scarred by defeat, is not consumed by the same burning hatred. His wartime service, though traumatic, didn't culminate in the same betrayal narrative. Austria's collapse is different from Germany's, it's the death of an empire, not the defeat of a nation-state. The Treaty of Saint-Germain, which Austria signs in September 1919, is harsh but less psychologically devastating than Germany's Treaty of Versailles. There's no stab in the back myth in Austria the way it festers in Germany. Hitler decides to try reviving his art career. It's the path of least resistance, the return to what he knows. He's not passionate about it, the war has dampened whatever artistic ambitions he once held, but it's familiar. He has credentials. He has skills. He starts taking on whatever work he can find. He sells paintings to American occupation troops who want souvenirs. He takes commissions for portraits of the newly prominent social democratic politicians, swallowing his nationalist pride for the paycheck. He designs propaganda posters for political parties. Ironically, his artistic skills serve the democratic parties he privately despises. He attends political meetings occasionally, drawn by curiosity and the veteran camaraderie these gatherings offer. He speaks up in discussions, his intensity and strong opinions making him memorable. A few people suggest he should enter politics formally. He demurs. He's not ready. He's not sure. The moment hasn't come. And so, as 1918 turns to 1919, Adolf Hitler settles into a precarious existence as a struggling artist in a defeated nation. He's bitter about the war's outcome. He holds right-wing views about Jews, socialists, and the November criminals who surrendered. But these are opinions, not obsessions. They're the background noise of his consciousness, not the driving force of his existence. He's not building a political movement. He's not discovering his messianic calling. He's just trying to survive. And in trying to survive as an artist rather than transforming into a revolutionary, he's inadvertently saving millions of lives that, in another timeline, he would take. By late 1919, Adolf Hitler has made his choice. Art over politics. Survival over revolution. The path not taken, in our timeline, becomes the path taken in this one. The rage that would have fueled his rise remains dormant, channeled into bitter coffeehouse complaints rather than stadium speeches. The ideology that would have killed millions remains unformed, scattered thoughts rather than a systematic worldview. The charisma that would have hypnotized a nation goes largely unused, wasted on arguments about architectural styles and rants about modern art. The art school acceptance letter of 1907, that single word, accepted, instead of rejected, has created a butterfly effect that's only beginning to unfold. A young man's ego was validated rather than crushed. A personal crisis was averted. A path toward radicalization was blocked. And now, as Europe struggles to build a new order from the rubble of the old, Adolf Hitler sits in a Vienna boarding house, painting watercolors, dreaming small dreams, and living an ordinary life. But the forces that would have elevated him to power still exist. Germany seethes with resentment at the Treaty of Versailles. Economic catastrophe looms. Right-wing nationalism is rising. Anti-Semitism festers. The conditions that created Nazism haven't disappeared, only the man who would have led it. And that raises the most profound question of all. Was Adolf Hitler inevitable? Or was he unique? Without him, would someone else have filled the void, leading Germany into another nightmare of conquest and genocide? Or was the specific catastrophe of Nazism the product of one man's twisted genius, and without that man, would history have taken a fundamentally different path? These are the questions we must confront as we move forward in this alternate history. Because we've prevented Hitler from becoming Hitler. But have we prevented the darkness? Or merely delayed it? In Act 2, we'll explore what happens to Germany in the 1920s and early 1930s when the man who would have led the Nazi Party is instead painting watercolors in Vienna. We'll discover whether Nazism could rise without its prophet, whether the Holocaust was inevitable or contingent, and whether one art school acceptance letter really could change the course of human history. Because in our timeline, 60 million people died in World War II, and 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. But in this timeline, it's 1919, and none of that has happened yet. The future is still unwritten. And somewhere in Vienna, a 29-year-old failed artist who will never become a dictator is deciding what to paint tomorrow. The butterfly has flapped its wings. Now we'll see what storms it prevents, or creates. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss Act 2. See you in the next video.